The thing that's beautiful about Morse is that you have one input and 30 different outputs, and that lends itself very well, to people with limited mobility. It's already used as a language for people who are kind of paralyzed from the neck down, to kind of communicate with paddles. There's an opportunity there to design something that is accessible.
Right now in 2022, it's really easy to get communications from all around the world. We're based in Australia, but you might be listening to SIFTER in the US, in Europe, in South America, Asia, wherever. All you have to do is find our episodes and click and then hit download. But around 100 years ago, communicating across the world was really tricky. If you wanted to do it, it was slow, and there was the invention of the telegraph, which actually went and changed all of that. It made near instantaneous communications possible. And during World War I, it turned the tide of battle. It's part of a historical puzzle game developed by Sheffield-based developer Alex Johannsson, who was inspired by alternative controllers and single button inputs to make Morse, which is a puzzle game that is similar to Battleship, where you have all the answers laid out in front of you, but you just need to put them in the right order, learning Morse code along the way. I started by asking Alex, what is Morse?
So Morse is a game that teaches you the lost language of Morse code. As you mentioned, you're using kind of timing tactics and telecommunication to try and tip the scales in the Great War. As part of the game, it's a mix of strategy, kind of typing of the dead, or kind of Morse hero almost, and you just use those to kind of call down artillery strikes and sink ships, shred planes, and shell trenches.
It's like Mavis Beacon teaches warfare or something like
exactly, that.
Exactly, yeah. Tell me, why is it that you wanted to make this game? What was it about Morse code and that sort of interaction that sort of clicked as an idea for a game for you?
So Morse actually has like a very peculiar origin in that a lot of games kind of take inspiration from like, art or music, or I don't know, in an era of history. Morse did get those inspirations, but initially it was inspired by physical design. So if I just kind of reach behind the camera here. Basically, I was at a workshop doing custom controller design. I've been doing alt control stuff for about a decade now. I came across this clothes peg and was like, I wonder if this would make a very good, like a piano. Basically, I made like a piano set out of a series of clothes pegs, and then realized that I got bored after making the first one and was like, this makes a very satisfying telegraph key. So then I designed a very, very basic Flash game called Dot Dot Splash that eventually evolved into Morse. The game itself is actually 7 years old. It was originally a Flash game. So it's been around in the ether for quite a long time.
What was it about this project that really kept you working through these 7 years? Because, you could have moved on to something else. You could have tried something else. I know building stuff is a lot of fun. And, if you're anything like me, you've got a billion little projects all over the place. What kept you working on this game?
Well, you would be correct by your initial assertion that I did actually step away from the project for about 5 years. So I originally built the Flash game. Released it online, got probably 100,000 plays back in the era where Flash was still actually here. Had Rock Paper Shotgun and a bunch of other positive press coverage. But then, as I was pitching it to publishers, was just kind of like, I've never shipped a game before. Why am I pitching for all this money? I'm gonna go build some games. So I went away. I released 6 or 7 mobile games, most of the free to play market. Really cut my teeth doing UI and UX, and then had the kind of weird pivot that brought me back to Morse was when the play date was announced. I wanted to try and bake the aesthetic of Morse down to the kind of play date 1 bit, because I was like, you could use the crank for radio frequency tuning, and that just from baking that down to kind of black and white, I was like, let's try add 1 color to it and see if this looks a little bit better, and it did, and that kind of led me back down the path of working on the project.
Tell me a little bit about the controller design, the key that you've built, because you've got it sitting there right next to you. It looks pretty impressive. Tell me about how that interacts with the game.
Okay, so as mentioned, like Morse's inception came from physical design, and as part of that, alt control design has been an incredibly important part of my career path. I think it's one of the most underexplored areas of games development right now, given there are like billions pouring into the industry and people are still using an interface older than the keyboard. So as old as the telegraph. Sorry, I messed up the joke. Yeah, the fact that that we're using such an antiquated interface to interact with games. This is far more compelling as an interaction for interacting with the game. I actually do have the original manufactured telegraph key that we used for a good while. This is it here.
How vintage is that? Is it new? Do they still make them, or is that just one that's been sitting around for yonks?
So this was manufactured, but we've made it from like brass. And this material called Bakelite, which is like the pre-plastic material that people used to manufacture things. Yeah, and for me, like physical design is like a really important thing. Yeah, and seeing people's reactions when they come to the booth when I show it at events, usually the reaction is can I take this home? Or how much is this going to cost? And can I play it without the controller? And for me, it's a very high aspiration, but I would love for more. There's always a question of commercial viability around alt controllers, and I would love to build a game that isn't necessarily requiring a custom controller, but like enriched to a point that people go out of their way to either buy one or make one or give themselves that authentic experience.
Just thinking about that, it really looks like it would be a perfect game for the Xbox Adaptive Controller, which is those big pads on there. Is that something you've thought about when playing this game? Is it something how that works?
Yes. So this is something that I very much want to lean into with the project is accessibility controls. Yeah, like I've already spoken to, there's a charity called Special Effect about and had a faff with the adaptive controller. I very much like the idea of this being the thing that's beautiful about Morse is that you have one input and 30 different outputs, and that lends itself very well, to people with limited mobility. It's already used as a language for people who are kind of paralyzed from the neck down, to kind of communicate with paddles. So yeah, there's an opportunity there to design something that is accessible. And what's nice about accessible design, for the most part, is that it adds more options for other players. So in the case of in the game, you've got this thing that reduces the threshold of how long you have to wait to enter your next letter. And for people with kind of reduced motor skills, you can kind of crank that all the way down to make it take longer. Or if you're a very, very good telegraphist, you can crank it all the way up and have it be really quick.
What is the game to play? What are you doing in each level? You sort of explained that, this is the interaction that you're doing. You're basically sending commands based on the language that's in the game. But what are you doing?
Okay, yeah, that's probably should cover that. So basically, you are effectively a World War I drone operator. So you have this effectively like a battleship grid that you're targeting various points of. So you have two words, so two axes. So you've got your word on one axis and then your number on another. And with that, you enter Morse code. So let's say A1, so dot dash and then dot dash 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 dash. And then your little target reticule will locate to that point, and then you can use an arsenal of artillery to eliminate targets on the map.
When you're sort of designing this game, I'm curious about the sort of challenge level. You talked a little bit about adjustability, adjusting for different ability skill sets and, levels of ability. I'm just curious, is it a really hard game? Is it a teaching game? Where does it sort of sit?
So to use a World War I pun, this is a war on two fronts. Teaching a game where you have to learn a language and also teach mechanics of the game And I've spent a lot of time like really thinking about how to make that as accessible as possible, and kind of understandable. One thing that's really magic is, well, my background is in education for context, so I've taught like probably about 500 kids how to kind of build their own games and stuff like that. So yeah, like designing experiences that are accessible and understandable is something I've really sunk a lot of my career into. And as part of that, what's really magical is taking the game to events, seeing people approach the booth very uncertain and kind of, oh, I couldn't possibly learn this language, and within a couple of minutes, picking up the language very quickly.
If I want to build my own telegraph key, what do I do? What's the best way for me to do that? How does it actually interact with the game that you can just pick up on Steam?
So I have aspirations as part of again, we've talked about the commercial viability of alt controllers. My approach is going to be to, as an educator, distribute educational materials for people to build these controllers themselves. For the most part, you just need a basic contact switch. If I just very quickly just pop this little case open. This isn't the inner workings, but this is something that I've used for a lot of my career. So the thing I use to power it is this thing called a makey, which is like just got very basic contact switches. Contact points. Very simple circuitry. The only thing you need to have is a live, the live wire and an earth wire, and connect them together, and that's enough to simulate a Morse code tap. As long as you can come up with some single input of controlling the telegraph key, you should be fine.
How far along are you in development at this stage? It sounds like you've got a lot of the elements there, but when can people be able to play it?
So currently, the game itself, we got UK Games Fund support back in 2020. We used that to develop the game over roughly a year. We now have this like really solid vertical slice that kind of captures roughly about an hour and a bit's worth of gameplay. We are currently in the process of getting a publisher, and once that is achieved, it will take roughly a year of development to kind of take the game fully to release. We have aspirations with it being a two-input game to bring it to all commercial platforms. I'm very excited to see how it handles on a Switch.
What's your favorite thing about Morse code as a language?
The thing that I really like about it is the tree of accessibility, where like you have it triages off. So you start with one dot and one dash, and then that branches to dot dash. And basically what it means is that because I'm using code words as part of the game, you can always come back to this little safe space of easy to input letters, and then be more ambitious. So there's that nice. You've got that nice flow for the player, so they never feel like they're completely overwhelmed, and that's why it's so accessible to a lot of players. But the favorite thing about Morse is that I have loved designing a game with a historical legacy attached to it. Just for the most part, in the interactions that I have with the public, I've had so many compelling stories of people who either have relatives, kind of your parents or grandparents who interacted with Morse code. I had one guy who came up to the booth, saw these headphones, and was like, I have a picture of my grandfather from the Second World War wearing that brand of headphones as he served as a military telegraphist on a naval ship. And at this point, I had no idea that these headphones were actual telegraphist headphones. Or there was another story when I was at GDC where some guy came to the booth and was like, my grandfather was a telegraphist, my father was a telegraphist, and I just have their heirlooms sitting around the house doing nothing. I'm going to use this game to connect with their legacy. And it's I to be honest, I never really want to build a game again that this scale that doesn't have this historical richness, just because it brings so much more to the project than I could have possibly imagined.
I can definitely hear the passion in your voice, Alex. I can tell this is something you've loved for a really long time, and I can't wait to, give it a go and see other people play it as well. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thanks. Take care.
If people want to find out more information, where should they go to?
So you can either follow me on Twitter, so that's AlexVS Coding, and then of course the game is technically available as a demo on Steam. So if you can go over there, check it out, give it a wish list, that would be just grand.
That's Alex Johannsson, a developer based in Sheffield who's working on the gritty black and white puzzle game Morse. You can pick up a demo for Morse on the Steam right now. The game's still in development, so there'll still be a little while before you get your hands on the full version, but you can check out what it's like to play right now. We know you love listening to SIFTER, so if you'd like to support our work, we've got a Ko-Fi where you can contribute whatever you think it's worth to you. Even a small amount makes a big difference to us, so you can head to sifter.com.au/support. A couple of dollars will help us keep making the shows that you love. That's sifter.com.au/support. SIFTER is produced by Nicholas Kennedy, Carl Pauletto, Fiona Bartholomaeus, Daniel Ang, Daniel Hines, and Adam Christou. Mitch Lowe is our senior producer who edited this episode as well. And my name is Gianni and I'm the executive producer. Until next time, have fun.